Thank you, Sarah, for joining us today. Very interesting, because I know that you're a speaker, but you've also been in the position of organising events. So you know exactly what the problems are from both sides, really. Could you tell us a little bit more about your background and how you do and how you got into the event side, and we'll lead in from there?
Yeah, sure. So I have been a lawyer for 15 years, but don't hold that against me. And one of my jobs was to organise our annual conference for 70 lawyers plus external speakers. And one of the real difficulties that I found was that everyone had a slightly different view about what they wanted from the event. And trying to get all of them happy at the same time was really difficult. And the other thing I think is slightly different when you're organising the internal conference is a lot of the speakers were members of staff, and controlling people you know really well can be a slightly difficult juggle. But I learned a lot. I used to read the feedback because I wanted to get better. I wanted to make sure they were great events for everyone, including particularly our external speakers who travelled, given up their time, and really wanted to make them better. So I learned a lot in the 5 years I was running those conferences. Oh,
gosh. Right. So hence why the rookie mistakes then.
Yeah, because I made all of them at the beginning. I really did. And it took me 5 years to get, reasonably good at them, I would say.
Oh my goodness, didn't realise it'd be that long. So let's go with the first mistake, the first biggest kind of learning curve that you learned.
So my biggest learning curve, which I learned after the first conference, was to have a special secret program to keep everyone on time.
Okay, special secret program. Sounds interesting.
So I used to have a public program which went to all the delegates, which said when we were doing things, when we were going to have breaks and all that kind of stuff. The speakers got a completely different program, because I found that if I gave them 45 minutes, they'd take an hour. And I really wanted to make sure that people got a lot of other value out of the conference. So it's not just about the speakers and the content. So I used to say that one of the things that was really important was to get Q&A and feedback. And I know for lots of people going on conferences, it's actually not the main content that they want. They want their questions answering. If I can get my questions answered for my business now, that is so much more value than hearing something that they've been doing for 20 years. So I used to say to all my speakers, they had to do a 20-minute slot and quarter of an hour Q&A. Now, give most people, particularly lawyers, a 20-minute slot and you've got 30 minutes of content. But if they've got a 45-minute, if my official program says 45 minutes, I get 30 minutes of content, 15 minutes of great value in Q&A, still on time.
Right. Okay. So, and obviously time management is key as well to keep everything going along smoothly.
Nobody wants to be late. At any point, because actually if you're late, you're disrespecting the audience who've got other things to do, who might have set up one-to-ones during your breaks. You're disrespecting the other speakers because you might be cutting them down massively in terms of their slot. And actually sponsors, some of those speakers are sponsors and they've paid good money to have their 45 minutes. So it's really important to keep to time.
Right. Okay. So what's the next kind of pearl of wisdom?
Oh, well, I think it's a bit to do with your program again, is actually making sure you provide fabulous networking opportunities. Because the content of your conference is only one of the reasons people are there. They're there to meet the other people at the conference, or they're there to meet the speakers. And if you have short networking breaks, then they've barely got time to go to the toilet, grab a cup of tea, check their BlackBerry or their smartphone or their email, maybe get a bit of fresh air, maybe even have a fag. And if you've got quarter of an hour, you've got 400 delegates, they're basically running around trying to do far too many things. If you give them a half-hour networking break, they've got time to do all the basic minimum that you want them to do, go to the toilet and all that kind of stuff. But also, you've got the opportunity for them to network, to meet each other, to meet the speakers who hopefully are still hanging around. So they're doing all that bit, and the speakers get to speak to the audience, get feedback, maybe take video testimonials. Sponsors get to speak to speakers. So actually that half-hour networking break looks like a massive chunk out of your program, but it's so necessary to get really good value out of that conference.
But wouldn't it be a good trick or good tip, I should say, to actually have a special dedicated room for networking for the VIPs or the sponsors, with the speakers.
Brilliant. Particularly if you can do it before and after. So you could have a half-hour networking slot during the lunch break for VIPs, for speaker sponsors and stuff. You could have a good session, a pre-conference session, so you know what other people are talking about. And also at the end of the conference, most people sort of carpet burn. They kind of go, yay, out on time, I'm off for my train. Actually, why? You've got 300 people in the room with massive expertise.
But that comes back down to the scheduling, the secret schedule again. Yeah. So would you say in that secret schedule, now that we know about with the networking, you'd actually put in a time slot for the speakers that they've got to stay around for networking and actually discuss it with them at the beginning?
Absolutely. And I tend to, my secret program always had the official start time and the time I expected it to start. And the two were quite different, often because I was used to the fact that people had to travel a long way. They couldn't park. There were train strikes, tube strikes, planes going wrong. They couldn't get their lunch. They'd been up the night before meeting the other speakers and therefore might not have been at their best at 8 o'clock in the morning. So lots of different ways to build in that little bit of extra time. And if the speakers know about it, it actually calms them down to know that it's already pre-planned.
Right. Okay. So that is one of the key things, is putting people at relaxed, that even if they know that it's going slightly over, there is time in the program to make readjustments.
I know someone who was at a conference recently and they were an hour late for lunch.
An hour late.
And the person who was speaking during that overrun must have had an audience who were distracted, they were disgruntled, they were hungry, they were thirsty, they were thinking, I promised someone I'd call them at that time. Terrible. You've lost your audience if you're running behind schedule. It's kind of like the most heinous sin is to run behind.
Well, we'll come back to that point in a minute, because I'm quite interested on how you'd actually bring your audience back on time. Because from an event management point of view, when you've got that situation, and especially when you had a keynote that you've paid a lot of money for, and you've actually already told the keynote that they've only got 45 minutes, and the next thing you know, they're still doing an hour and a half because they believe they're giving value for the value of the money. It's, how to bring that back on.
I think that's really difficult. I think one of the things is to be really firm when you give people what you ask them to do, is to say to them, actually, your job is to do it in 45 minutes. Please rehearse, please practice, and please be aware that at 30 minutes time, I am going to start winding you up, and it's your job to wind it up properly. And I think a lot of event MCs or planners are too nervous of saying, oh no, I've paid them a lot of money, that, I don't want to shut them up. They're giving great value. Well, they are, but who knows that the next speaker isn't going to give even better value? How can you possibly tell? Particularly if you're not going to give them, the opportunity to say that stuff. So a really good professional speaker will be able to wind it up.
Right.
Even if they think they're halfway through, a really good speaker should be able to notice that you're trying to shut them up.
So a friend for the organisers of speakers where they might have the 40-minute slot, realise that everything's gone over time, can see the schedule that there's very little to come through to make up the time. And whilst they've got a 45-minute slot, they can actually condense it down into 20 minutes on the spot and actually help you get back on programme.
Absolutely. And I learned this a very long time ago. My very first speaking gig was at the end of a conference. 500 engineers had been in this conference all day, and I was the last person on. Normally don't put a lawyer at the end because their attention has already dived. And they were running late. And I'd been at the refreshment break. I chatted to some people. They said, yeah, it's great, but there's so much stuff that we've had to take in. And I stood up, and the first thing I said was, by my calculation, we've got a quarter of an hour until you want to be in the bar, so I'll keep this short. And that actually got their attention back, because they were thinking, oh, God, she's scheduled for 45 minutes. I want to be in the bar. It's a Friday. What am I doing here? And actually, just by saying, I am going to finish in a quarter of an hour, I'm going to keep it neat, I'm going to, I'll cut my stories. I got their attention back. They were engaged. They gave me a quarter of an hour of really good attention rather than drifting. Sort of a 45 minutes glazed look. It's just a sign of someone who's not so precious about their own being there,
but it's about the audience.
It's more focused on the audience.
Oh, great. Well, yeah, because I think one of your next points is about with the meeting the audience.
Yeah, and I think, the conference is not just about making money or, getting your name on the stage or being next to someone who's really fabulous or, meeting your fans. It's about making sure the expectations of everyone are met. So the meeting planner's happy, the sponsors are happy, the speakers are happy, and the audience are happy. And all those three need to be happy for it to be a great conference.
All three?
Oh, four.
That's okay.
So, I think
for those of you who weren't listening, they were.
There were four.
The audience.
Yep.
The speakers. The conference. The sponsors.
Yep. And the event planner.
And the event planner, or the conference host.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Because of course you can actually have the company doing their own conference.
Absolutely. Yeah, and you can have people who are speaking and sponsoring, people who are speaking but not sponsoring, but also in the audience. So the overlap is quite considerable. But actually, I think meeting their expectations is really important. And part of that is about how you set it up beforehand, how much you get them to talk to one another. And there's nothing worse than a drive-by speaker, for example, who comes in, does a slot, repeating something that's happened earlier in the day and they weren't there for, and then leaves having stolen the next material of somebody else. So hang on, just, even if speakers can talk to one another or you can encourage them to talk to one another, the chances are you'll get a better, more cohesive conference.
But wouldn't it be going back to part of the planning with the expectations is actually doing the homework in the first place and putting that grunt work in, making sure that people know what they're talking about? So you don't get that drive-by. So even if they do come in and go very, very quickly, you've still got a coherent program, still sticking to your schedule.
I agree, but I think quite often when you look at the title of what somebody's speaking about, it tells you nothing about the content. It doesn't tell you what stories you're going to choose, and their takeaway sometimes, you'll be better at business, you'll be bigger at this, you'll be, able to use social media. Well, all of those things are so wide. There's no... Until you've actually sat through it, you don't know what they're going to cover in detail. So, people can overlap or disagree.
Oh, I've seen that before. That's quite funny. I've seen it where one person got up and said, the age of big fees is dead. Sorry. Yeah, the age of big fees is dead. They then left and the next person up said, well, actually, I get paid very big each week. Thank you very much.
Yeah, and I know people who are professional speakers who've been on the same conference program with somebody who was going to talk about the fact that you should do all your marketing in person, and they were an online marketing expert. And they said, I really need to speak to them first because I don't want to be saying completely the opposite because that will discredit both of us. So actually we need to have some sort of link or theme. And it is a really good sign if you've spoken to the people who are speaking before you.
Right.
Just to double check.
So again, it's coming back down to putting the schedule of networking, the green room or the VIP lounge, as they like to call it.
Yeah. Or, you can have a blab with all the people who are going to be on the conference, just so you get a bit of conversation happening before the event. You don't even have to be there in person anymore.
No, but then it's getting people to sign up to techie stuff, and because even just trying to get them to do Skype is sometimes...
It can be, but then, perhaps if they are that difficult to pin down, they're not the right speaker. Because actually, a great speaker is not just about a drive-by speaker. It's not just someone who gives great value and then goes. It's about helping you shine all the way through as an event planner or host or MC or whatever. Being easy to work with is a sign of a good professional. Yes.
You're so right on that. I've seen a speaker cost many event planner their job when they've done it badly.
Yeah.
And I think that's why this it's so important to make sure you're getting the right people in on the stage.
Yeah.
Because the one thing that is not really highlighted in the events industry is that you lose your job because of somebody else doing a bad job.
Yeah. And that's terrible because often they don't even know that they've cost someone their job.
No.
They're in and out.
Absolutely. And it's no skin off their nose that 3 people might have been fired over their bad presentation.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right. Okay.
Don't do it.
So it comes back down to good communication, putting the grunt work, making sure that the guy is the right person, that you actually think and what their topic's going to be. And it's just spending the time really getting to know them.
Yeah. And if they prove to be, you know, really difficult to work with you, then why are any of the audience going to want to work with them afterwards?
True.
You know, why is your company going to want to work more with them afterwards? You know, sometimes you can tell so much in the build-up.
That's true. You know, but you have some people that feel that they are very big personalities and they're going to be doing the bums on seats routine.
Well, they may be doing you a massive favour in the short term, but
in the long term, costing your job is not a good idea.
No.
All right. So after having such a stressful time, obviously, we're going to have what's you've mentioned it about with a bar.
I don't want to focus on the bar specifically, but one of the things, if you look at event feedback sheets, and if you look at what people tweet about, what they're at conferences, what they say on TripAdvisor about conference venues, food and drink seems like the last thing you should be worrying about. But actually, food and drink can make or break a conference.
As simple as that, food and drink.
Yeah.
Right.
So I've run conferences where I've had the drinks arrive so late that by the time they come in an afternoon session, people were glazing over. They were kind of almost panting and their attention had completely disappeared. So that actually for the afternoon, they weren't concentrating. They weren't paying attention. They were just thinking, when am I going to get that cup of tea, that glass of water? And I'm gluten-free and I've been to conferences where the food has been so bad that I'm actually feeling dizzy by the afternoon.
And if you're in a hot auditorium?
You know what? People will lose their attention. So however great your lineup is, if people haven't had a decent cup of tea, a decent cup of coffee, something to eat, you are losing them. So the speakers aren't going to get the benefit they are. The sponsors aren't going to get a benefit because they're all dashing off to go and find a corner shop that can give them a packet of something to eat. And the audience aren't going to network very well because actually when they go to networking, they'll just be grumpy about what is or isn't there.
Yep. As Phil said, never mind the content. Where's the grub?
If the food is so bad or if there's not the right sort of food or, you know, you haven't got your cup of tea when you really want a cup of tea, you know, you do lose the attention of your audience and they will give you really bad feedback.
I was going to say, does that contribute to the feedback form that actually you could have had everything else spot on, but because they're hungry?
Yeah.
Oh, gosh.
And often they don't even mention it. They just, you know, you ask them about the venue and they go, the venue's poor. Well, actually, the venue wasn't poor, but the food was terrible or the other way around. And I used to say, if I had a really small group, occasionally, if it was a very hot day, I'd go out and buy them all ice creams.
Wow.
And they didn't say the ice creams were great on the feedback, but the scores go up. So there's we make decisions not necessarily based on, you know, the content, the value to our business, but whether we left feeling happy. And one of the ways to make people happy is to feed them well. Really simple.
Do you find that that's actually becoming more and more difficult with the amount of dietary requirements? I mean, Ian's made a point on here that he was assisting with an event recently and he got a caning from the vegans, etc., because 50% wanted special requirements. And you've already said yourself being special requirement, it does play a big part.
It does play a big part, but some conference venue organisers have this absolutely, you know, sorted. I went to one where they had 6 different types of gluten-free cake.
6?
In afternoon tea on a platter. And it was just like, I wouldn't normally eat 6 bits of cake, but if I've got a choice of 6, all of which I can eat, I'm going to have a tiny little bit of each now. And it was brilliant because actually, rather than, you know, I normally afternoon, my energy's flagging a bit. I would have fruit in the morning, but cake in the afternoon. Normally I'm sitting there going, oh, another fruit salad. Ooh, how exciting. And then this one, I went back in feeling really, you know, happy. So at the end of a conference, it had lifted my spirits just enough that actually, no, I was in a much better mood. And, you know, we pay money to be put in a better mood. So why don't we pay money to put them in a better mood by having decent food? Now, just because you don't have dietary requirements doesn't mean that you don't have an audience full of them nowadays.
Right. Well, I love Ian's comment. He said, forget the grub, it's the grog that helps. But I think there's quite a few conferences that you're not allowed to, especially here in the UK, who, if you start serving alcohol, you actually become responsible for people. That's what I understood. So the venue can serve them alcohol, and you could pick a venue that might provide alcohol, but you have to be careful.
Yeah, and I think alcohol in lunchtime often leads to very sleepy delegates, because a lot of them aren't used to drinking at lunchtime. Many years ago, I went to a 2-day training event, and I was so nervous. I was very young. I was the only female amongst a whole load of construction lawyers, and ended up having a large glass of wine the first day. I could barely stay awake in the afternoon because it was a dark, hot room.
Lightweight.
Oh my goodness me, keep me awake. I need coffee.
Now you know why they serve coffee in the afternoon.
Yeah. So sometimes a little bit of grog is useful, but maybe at the end of the day rather than at the beginning. But actually, if you think about it, it's a really good point, because actually if we want people to stay at the end and network a bit more, then a glass of wine often persuades them to stay.
It's the relax after,
rather than dash off home.
Right. And you'd build that back into the schedule.
Yeah.
Networking in the bar. But there's quite a lot of conference organisers that are trying to get by because on the value of the networking. I've noticed that, and the value of the food.
Yeah.
And it's interesting you said you need all four, because some of these conference organisers push we need to network, we need to get to know our clients, we need to sort of like schmooze the people that we're trying to attract. But in actual fact, they don't put on very good speakers in the first place. So most of these guys are actually, the audience are actually out in the bars and spending everywhere else because they've heard the keynote before. There's no new information come through because it's a person from another conference.
Yeah.
Or it's the same old explorer that they heard the same presentation 7 years ago.
Yeah.
Which is
they haven't gone up another mountain since. So but the problem with that is, how can you that's just like networking on steroids. There's so many different networking events we can go to, not all of which require us to travel, stay overnight, be away from the office for a whole day. Unless you're absolutely sure that audience is one you want to be in, you're going to not put it in your diary until quite late in the day.
Okay, so you're talking about the return on the value of actually, is it return on value of staying at the office or return on value of actually attending?
Yeah, and if I was a busy self-employed or small business, I would look at that conference and think, yeah, the networking might be great, but if I get a better offer, I'm going to do that instead. So I might book it at the last minute, which actually, when you're an event organizer, is the worst possible thing, is to have a whole load of people waiting to press ticket. And in the meantime, your heart is just going, nobody's coming. And how can you tell people they should come and network when nobody's yet booked tickets? So it's a bit of a double-edged sword. You do need good content to bring people in the first place.
But then that's also back down to the speakers themselves, because I've noticed that some of those, they also say they're going to come and they say they're going to do the presentation. And then on the day, it's like, I've got something else better to do.
Ooh, but that's why you need a contract that will tell you. If they pull out, then one of the things I say to speakers is, if you have to pull out for a really good reason, ideally that you can't speak at all, not that you're going to speak somewhere else,
Absolutely.
is that you'll get a replacement.
Absolutely.
Because that's a professional thing to do.
Absolutely. It's one of the things I've noticed amongst the professionals. I've known some very, very big names that have offered to do things free of charge pro bono. And even though they get offered then their full fee or even double their fee to do something else on that same day at that same time, they are professional enough that they still stick to the contract, or they still stick to their promise to actually attend, because they realise that even you as an event organizer, even if they're doing it pro bono, you're still being charged to market them. And you're still using your time and effort to get their name out there. So you're actually doing their marketing, which they would then have to pay if they were doing that themselves anyway. So they do appreciate that.
Yes, and I organise events for the Professional Speaking Association in Manchester, and I've found that speakers all offer their time for free who come and speak. But if they can't do it for whatever reason, I find the really good speakers are the ones that say, I can't do it, but I know several people who can. I'll fill the space that I was meant to fill. Leave it with me. Which is brilliant, because, the last thing I can do is run around and reschedule everything. So, no, it's really useful if you get a good speaker like that. Okay,
yes, especially if they can provide you somebody who is similar to them or on their topic.
Yeah, and that's one of the things, speakers should know other speakers on their topic, or who have a similar background, similar style, similar content. Obviously, everyone's different, but being able to know who your competitors are so that you can bring them in, it gives you great credibility, both with other speakers and event planners.
Okay. If anybody else would like to come and join in and share some of their experiences, please do. We are just sort of like talking away and getting to know a little bit of the rookie mistakes. So we've covered 4 great areas of the rookie mistakes, from having a program that counteracts lateness and time management and being able to pick up should there be a time slippage. We've covered great networking opportunities and how to plan for them for both the sponsors, the audience and the speakers. And we've covered making the audience happy and managing their expectations, as well as the speakers and the sponsors, and good food and drink. Is there anything that you can say and spill the beans on when something horrendously went wrong, and what happened, or how you was able to put it right, or something you've heard?
Well, I had a speaker who couldn't get across a channel because there was a channel strike at the last minute, and they were my keynote speaker.
Ouch.
So that was tricky, because obviously they were doing their very best to get across and we got quite short notice. And then it's a case of, do I have another professional rather than an in-house speaker who can talk about this, who can not talk the same content, but it can actually cover some of the issues they were going to cover? Because it was quite a specific lead into the rest of the conference. Thankfully, I did have someone who was fairly new to the firm, actually, who picked up and ran with it. Didn't use their slides, but actually did a really good job of ad hoc leading a discussion. It became more of a discussion session. Even though we had a conference of sort of 70 plus people, we turned it into a, let's see what the themes are going to be for the rest of today, which then other speakers could pick up on. So it was a complete turnaround from having an external speaker come in, give us their expertise, us go, wow, how brilliant are they? We realised that actually we had quite a lot of expertise in house. So it was a good thing in the end. But honestly, those were a half hour of running around like a headless chicken going, who can do this? Who can do this? And, it wasn't enough time to get anyone else in. We were in the middle of nowhere in some industrial estate.
Oh, crikey. So again, it's coming back down to, so we've got the reverse as well. You've got to have an idea of the speakers that can actually extend their program without waffling. Yes.
And a lot of the speakers will have more than one speaker title or more than one speech that they can actually cover,
unless they're an explorer,
unless they're one trick pay me. But knowing that in advance, or knowing that you've got a reserve, or that sort of thing, I think actually having a couple of reserves, if you're really running a big conference with all external speakers, having a couple of people in your black book that with 24 hours notice you can ring and say, I had a disaster, they can't come for whatever reason, are you still free? Really useful, really useful.
Okay.
Safe pair of hands. You need a couple of safe pairs of hands.
Right. Okay. So it's coming back down to the content then as well, because if you've got a good audience that's already signed up, then you're also going to get the attraction of the speakers, sort of like saying, well, who have you got, what it's about, etc.
Yeah.
So how do you get audiences engaged beforehand? Do you do that, or is it part of the program?
Well, I think a few years ago, people just sort of sent out a program. Didn't even, wouldn't have a web page, they wouldn't have Twitter, they wouldn't use social media. But I think actually, if you have people coming to speak, one of the things that you can use is do little video Q&As that say, what are you coming to talk about? What are their takeaways? So actually, if you send that round to your database, even if they don't come on your conference, they've learned something about the speaker and they've got great value. So it's not just about buy my conference, buy my conference, buy my conference. It's, this is what you'll learn. If you like this bit, come and listen to some more. Even if you don't, the speaker's been marketed, you've made yourself look good because you're giving great value. So the audience is happy, the speaker is happy, and you become happy because people then might share it. So I think, just using the power of social media, of Twitter and LinkedIn and YouTube and Blab and all that kind of stuff to show how much value people are going to get by giving up a day of their time a day of your time is still an incredibly valuable part of your life. You've got to explain to them, why do they want to do it?
Absolutely. And I think there are some event organisers that kind of miss that key point. Because a CEO who's on a very high salary has got to feel that the content and the whole day is going to be worth their time, even if they don't stick around for the food, because I've known quite a few of those to be just like the speakers, where they're the drive-by audience. Actually come in for the one and go.
And I went to a conference where the ticket price was incredibly good value for money, and I had to say at the end, that was a waste of my day.
Really?
Because actually that's a day out of my business. That's an incredibly valuable day to me. And to me, it was entirely wasted by poor content, poor speakers, poor time management, poor venue management. It was a catastrophe for me. I know other people got something out of it, but for me, it was just like, why did I bother? Why? I could have stayed at home. In fact, I'd have been better off sat at home doing daytime television, because at least I could have answered some emails.
But don't you find in my experience, when I've gone to venues like that or events like that, it's because the event organizer's actually got a different brief, and it's more about making it as a profit rather than they want to profit there and then from the event rather than a deferred gratification. Yeah.
I think that's right. But also it's sometimes because they want to put their mates who they know do a bit of speaking on the stage to market their mates, because they, it's, being nice to somebody who's got a business, helping them get more exposure, without actually thinking, does this add any value to the people who are likely to attend?
Yeah, no.
Because if it doesn't, if it's just a load of mates telling the story of how they set up their business, their florists, or their social media stuff, or how they climbed a mountain, that's great.
Absolutely. No, I get. You've just actually reminded me. No, you've just actually reminded me. I was working with an organisation, health organisation, and their marketing department did a lot of conferences. And on one particular one, I just happened to overhear, because I was working in the sales team, marketing communications, and I heard the marketing team say, "Well, we're going to put on this conference for the doctors, and who should we get to kick this conference off?" One of them turned around and said, "Well, you run a sideline in DJ, supplying DJs. Why don't we get one of your guys, one of your new ones, to come in, and we'll kick the session off with music?" Well, doctors are into that sensory, and it'll be really good for them. And I'm sure you can make a link somewhere. And I'm thinking, hang on, you're not giving value. You're not using everything properly. And why would I, as a doctor, feel somebody playing music at me with the best will in the world?
Yeah,
it's relevant, because
absolutely,
it wouldn't be me that would value the music. It'd be the users and the people that I'd be working with would understand that. But I don't need the treatment myself, If
it was part of a session on the value of music in therapeutic activity,
absolutely
fine.
Which it wasn't. It was nothing to do with it. So so they were just filling the seats with who they knew. Yeah. Rather than actually doing the grunt work, doing the leg work. And then after that particular conversation, it was pretty much, well, who in the organisation can we get as well? And they unfortunately picked people that had just been fired from the organisation and asking them to come back and doing a keynote. It was like, I don't get it.
At every stage, you have to think, what's in it for the audience, the speaker, the sponsor, or me? And if it doesn't tick any of those boxes, it doesn't deserve to get any airtime. It really must add value at every point. And I book speakers who say, "Oh, well, I did this session for such and such a people. You'll love it." But how would you know that? My audience is different to that audience. What's in it for this audience? Why should I give you the time in front of my members? Why should you give the time in front of my, contacts, my clients? Why? Absolutely. And if you can't explain the why, then I'm sorry, you're going to go down my to-do list.
Now, we talked a little bit about feedback from audiences. How do you deal with the feedback from the audiences? Is there follow-up, or should you listen to everything they say, or try and see if there's like a hidden message that the food was rubbish, but they're just slating everything in the afternoon?
I think you should always listen to it. Feedback is just data. and you can interpret it the way you want to. And you can imagine that two different event organisers can read the same feedback and get completely different views about what that means. I think you should always read it. You don't have to do anything as a result of some of it. Because if you have a conference of 300 people and one person trashes it and says it was awful and everyone else said it was great, they probably were having a bad day. Right. And you just didn't help. But if you have a conference of 300 people and 250 people say it was terrible and didn't hit its mark, then you need to worry. Then you really need to look at it in detail and see what the themes were, to see where you got it wrong, and write the lessons down, because it's very easy the next time just to go, oh, I'll just do what I did before. No, you need to really feed it in. And that's one thing I used to constantly do, is read the feedback. Some of it was very positive. Some of it was griping for the sake of griping. Some of it was based on the individual and not a theme that was running through it. But you should read it and you should pay attention to it. Never read it the same day, though.
Okay, because you're
too emotionally involved. It's still your baby. It's like coming out of hospital with an ugly child. You don't want someone to say, oh my God. You really just want people to say, that was brilliant. Hey, well done, well done. And the next day they go, oh, by the way, you've got an ugly baby. So you don't read it the same day. Take a bit of a break, but read it all. Because it's all opinion. You don't have to change. You don't have to do things differently, but you do have to read it.
Is that why a lot of the professional event organisers go away on a holiday and come back for a wash-up meeting the week after?
Oh, yeah. And it's really important, because actually you need time to recover after running a conference. Try not to do anything the following day. Try to have either the systems in place to send emails to thank all the speakers while you're not there, but take some time off to review in yourself how it made you feel. Because if it made you feel good and you get good feedback, that's great. That means you're in line with the other people. If it made you feel great and everyone was grumpy as anything and they were running out of the door trying to avoid you, that's a pretty good sign that,
something went wrong.
Yeah, you weren't quite on the same wavelength as your audience.
Well, Ian's asked a very good question, because he said, well, you can manage the feedback at the conference level, or would you allow speakers to gather their own feedback?
I think some speakers want to have their own feedback sheets. The problem is, if you've got 10 speakers and 10 different feedback sheets, you're not going to get accurate feedback for all of those 10 speakers. If actually people want to give feedback individually to speakers, they often do it on social media nowadays. They will tweet about it. They will say what they liked. They will, pick up the points. Yeah, people do get annoyed with doubling up. If the conference has decided to ask for feedback, and then every speaker asks for feedback, it's just not going to work. That's part of managing expectations. How are we going to do feedback? Are you going to allow to take video testimonials, or do we have conference testimonials? So all this kind of stuff should be dealt with before you turn up. So you're not trying to deal with some speakers who want, business cards, brochures and everything else. Some conference organisers want goodie bags. Other people don't have bags, but they have files. It's a minefield. So unless you actually know what they want, you need to discuss it beforehand. Stick it in your contract if you want to, but you don't need to stick it in your contract. You just need to have it as part of your general, this is our expectations of how the conference is going to run. Add anything in that you think is missing. Tell us what you want and we'll try and work around that.
Right. Okay. So
we should be working together as a team, not trying to do our own separate thing.
But you've made a very, very valid point there, or another kind of observation. When speakers turn up with bits of paper to put all over the seats and all over the tables, and you haven't planned for it, or the goodie bags, or expecting to see goodie bags, how do you deal with them? Because I know sometimes some of them try to do what I call sneak-ins.
Yeah.
Sneak-ins being typically get your business card out, write your name, write yes, no to the answer to this question and pass them forward. Or yeah. And to be honest, I think if you're a good enough speaker, then they'll remember you without any sheet of paper, without any business card, without any logo across every single slide, without your Twitter hat, all that kind of stuff. If you're really good and you give great value, they will remember you. Even on a conference that's 2 days long with 20 speakers or 65 speakers or whatever, they will remember you. If you tank
no amount of paper is going to recover you.
But they do remember you, though.
Yeah, they'll remember you for all the wrong reasons. And I've been in conferences where you've had a speaker who's left a load of paper down for the delegates, and the next speaker comes in and everyone's just chucking it on the floor. It becomes litter. It's a waste of trees and paper and everything else. And really what we want is to give great value rather than give bits of paper out. And lots of people are using sort of Kiwi Live or automated systems or little drop boxes or, hidden pages on their website, social media. There's lots of different ways to give out value. If people want it, they'll come to you for it. Yes.
But I have seen some speakers do the old trick about books and take the one book and pass it through to the back and trying to create a bit of a stir to get them to come to their bookstore back in the exhibition.
Yeah.
So, it's been interesting with the tricks. Have you seen one that fools a lot of the rookie, being a newbie as an event organizer? Have you seen anyone or any speakers that have got like a bit of a cheap trick that actually you agree to doing something, but actually it's giving them extra promotional or extra marketing more than they actually really deserve?
What were you thinking of particularly, Cindy?
It's where I guess it's coming back down to my experience where you actually are working with somebody and it's a bit of a pro bono or it's low paid and it's not quite their full fee, but you do one hell of a load of shed loads of marketing. And because of what you've done for them, their profile goes up and then they don't actually attend and they don't even send an apologise, or they send such a bad person in their place without actually telling you.
Ooh, I haven't seen that. And that they would go immediately into my Don't Touch with a Barge Pole book. And it's terrible for your own positioning. And actually, you've let down all those people in the audience who have signed up because your name was there. And actually, if as an MC, if as a host, you can say, I'm afraid to say our next speaker was meant to be Cindy Michelle Waterfield, but unfortunately she appears to be washing her dog's hair today, so we don't have her. So I apologise if you're disappointed that Cindy Michelle is not with us today, but instead we've got Bob from accounts.
Right. So you do it in a nice way. You actually get your own back in a nice way.
I think it's entirely
Fantastic.
within your power to say why somebody has not turned up. And if they really let you down, they're letting the audience down. And all you can do as an event planner is say that we've done our best to replace them. And this is the next speaker that we could come up with in the time we were given. You can't magic them there. If they're not there, you can't get them there. But at the same time, you don't have to trash them. But, there are people there who are expecting them to turn up.
It's just the polite way.
You have to manage their expectations that they were thinking a certain speaker would be there. It's like going to many years ago, I went to a concert and the headline band were there, but one of the support bands who I really wanted to see because they were really popular managed to get a gig on Top of the Pops, which at the time was the most watched music show on television. So they thought 30,000 fans at this venue or several million on the BBC. So they didn't turn up. But then one of the other support bands said, look, they're not here. We're really sorry because I know some of you are expecting them to be here. So we're going to do some of their songs. How brilliant. I can't even remember who the band was that didn't turn up. But I remember the band that did some of their songs at a last minute thing to try and make us feel a bit better that they weren't there. That was brilliant for me. It was a really good way of turning the whole thing around and not trashing them, not saying, well, if we were
because they actually did
it, not trashing them, but actually, bringing it back and helping us all feel great about it.
So what's the best thing to do if you could give one kind of outstanding piece of advice that would really make a difference between a mediocre conference and a great conference? And something that you've experienced or done or seen?
Do you know, I think actually having a really coherent theme to a conference. So linking everything together so that it actually makes sense. So it's not just a random collection of speakers who've all got good ideas, but actually having in some way a running theme that weaves its way from start to finish. And thinking about which speakers should be at the beginning, which people should be at the end, rather than just slotting them in where you think it suits them, but actually thinking about the flow of the whole conference from the minute somebody has their first coffee, bit of networking, and goes into the main hall to when they leave. And if you can think of it as a performance from start to finish, you'll make a big difference. Because, you don't put a movie together by just randomly, putting 30-second or 30-minute sections together. It has to flow, and conferences ought to flow with some sort of rhythm, because it helps those of us who are slightly more, logically minded to fit it all in and know where we're going. And often you get a conference that kind of is just really chunky and bitty, and each of the bits are great value, but there's no links, there's no theme, there's no linking.
Right. Okay. So it's the actual linking that would keep somebody there then. Really?
Yeah, I think it can.
You're talking about the typical go for a break and you lose half the audience.
Yeah, absolutely, because they've done their bit. None of it, they don't relate to each other at all. So therefore, why would they bother staying? They did their bit on social media. They're happy now. They've met a few people. Let's go home and earn some money or whatever.
I tend to see a lot of that at expos. They just come for the one session, wander around a bit, and then go.
Yeah, and that doesn't help. It doesn't help anyone. It's not meeting expectations. It's not making it coherent. It's not, it's not helping the speakers who are coming on next. Can imagine you go and there's somebody massively famous like Anthony Robbins, for want of a better phrase. He comes on first, and then there's a break. 40,000 people leave the room. You're left with half a dozen people in the front row that you're talking to. It's blimey.
Oh, somebody was saying about that the other day on one of the other shows, that they were being brought in. There was a big speaker. They were being billed as exactly the same. And for them in their little town, they were getting a lot of press coverage. And they were to go on the stage after this guy. There was 200 people in the room as this guy was presenting. And when he finished, the organizer said, right, the exhibition is now opened. And everybody filed out apart from 12 people. So this speaker was actually left with just 12 people.
That's terrible, because they're all off to get their goodie bags, probably. Quick, I've got to get the goodie bags.
Absolutely. Not only just was it the goodie bags or anything, but it was the fact that they left her with the whole, in the main auditorium, with a big kind of media plaster saying she's going to talk on this subject, etc., etc. And she said afterwards, okay, just 12 people to stay behind. It didn't do much for her morale at the time, but
no,
she did make some very good contacts over there. But for me, it's a rookie mistake from an event organizer, because if you're going to do that, then you make sure that the next person on has that break that you was talking about, so people have time to go off, get the goodie bag, have a quick wander, and then come back.
Absolutely. The value has to be for all the speakers there, however big the names are, however much you might really want to, look at Donald Trump or Anthony Robbins or, someone who's Benedict Cumberbatch. The mere fact that they've drawn you in, the conference should be built around keeping everyone in.
Which comes back to expectations again.
And theme and, making great networking and making sure the speakers have spoken to each other. So, they're not just going, by the way, you don't want to hang around now.
But I have seen that where the speakers actually come to try and talk to the other speakers.
Yeah.
So they don't actually want to go anywhere else. They're just coming to actually have a chat amongst themselves, really.
Yeah, it can be a bit cliquey sometimes, that sort of event, isn't it?
And I think I've also been the other way, where the event organizer, they stood in a room with 200 of their clients, but their own sales team were all huddled in the corner talking to each other.
Oh.
And then afterwards said, well, the event wasn't of any value. Well, of course it wasn't. Their sales team were huddled in the corner, too frightened to go and talk to anybody.
Yeah, it's a fine line. And I think, I'm normally reasonably shy when I get big groups of people I don't know. And sometimes it's tempting to gravitate towards the people I do know. But I tend to push myself and, try and find out something about somebody who's attending the event that I can give great value.
Should we as event organisers then actually build in kind of these networking kind of sessions? Because I've seen that coming through as well, the speed network table, and they actually have a whole session for it.
Yeah, and I've been to events where in the afternoon, instead of having a speaker who's trying to deal with that sort of post-lunch lull, they have meet the experts, or they have, you know, your advisory board, or they have Q&A session in small groups so that people can pick their brains and get that value and meet each other in a slightly more formal but still small group setting.
Right. So that's the side rooms and stuff, really, the side meetings.
It's kind of like a smaller form of Q&A, because the problem with a massive conference is often you either have neither the AV or the, you know, logistical facilities to get 100 people to ask questions. And people feel intimidated often to ask a question which is really personal to them, because they think they'll look foolish. You know, like, how do I run a business? Like, that would be obvious.
But yes, you're quite right. The amount of people that they don't want to ask a question in the auditorium, but in actual fact, 9 out of 10 times I find they're not the only person thinking that question.
Yeah. And I do a lot of training. And one of the things I always say to people, because I deal with lawyers, they're often sitting there, kind of half of them are looking like they know it all. Half of them are looking like they wish they knew any of it. And I always say, you know, there's a Chinese proverb that says you can ask a question and be a fool for 5 minutes, or you cannot ask a question and remain a fool for the rest of your life. I said, I'd rather you asked a question and looked a fool for 5 minutes, but there is no such thing as a stupid question in my book.
Unless, of course, you're recording, then you do look for a fool for a little bit longer.
Well, yeah, okay. I'll give you that.
Sorry.
It's fine.
Okay. Is there anybody else? Oh, sorry. This is a question from Ian. We're doing some great sharing here and amongst speakers and event profs about how to run conferences. Do venues do the same? Some seem remarkably incompetent around AV capabilities.
Yep. I'm afraid to say I'll give you that. And you know, one of the things I really struggle with is when you've given them what you think are your AV requirements, and you turn up on the day and they go, oh no, that'll be extra if you want a flip chart, more if you want a pen that works, you know. Actually, we can give you all the AV, but we don't have any of the cables. I hope you bought your own. It's like, no.
Okay.
I went to a major event, 250 speakers, and they had free event Wi-Fi, which didn't work. It's like, how are people going to talk about this venue as being brilliant if it is? How are people going to talk about the speakers being brilliant? How are we going to share it on social media? How are we going to build it up? You know, all that kind of stuff. And in fact, they gave the Wi-Fi code right at the beginning, and it took half an hour for some people to log on. Well, half an hour of speakers were lost with heads down trying to get onto the event Wi-Fi. So, yeah, venues don't seem to be clued up on what you need to run a modern conference, because often you need it audio recorded, you need it video recorded, you need tweet feeds, you need Wi-Fi, you need great lighting, you need double screens, you need podiums, you need messages, you know, you need audio mics, all that kind of stuff.
Right. That's why a lot of speakers take their own stuff. But as you quite rightly said, if part of your marketing plan as an event organizer is to do a chat feed or a Twitter feed, then you're kind of stuffed if you can't get the word out there.
Yeah. And if you have a session where you're going to have Q&A based on Twitter questions using the event hashtag, and there's no Wi-Fi and people can't actually tweet, your program's looking a little empty. So hopefully you've got a professional speaker who can fill, but it's not good. You know, venues should be up to date. And actually one of those is just quiz the facilities manager. If I was an event coordinator, I would be on their case. And ideally I'd go and see the venue and I'd check that it would have the right sort of feel, the right sort of space, the right sort of facilities.
A little bit of a checklist of making sure of what you're actually needing. But
Absolutely.
So have you found then that what they say they have on their website and when you get there are two different things?
They often have it. Sometimes they can't find it.
Okay.
Sometimes the person who can set it up isn't in until 10 o'clock. And then sometimes they're just going to charge you more for it.
Right.
So, you know, you might want 2 flip charts and they're going to charge you 50 quid a flip chart. Well, you know, a bit of blue tack means you could stick some on the wall and create 2 flip chart looks. So now I think some of the times they are really trying not very hard to be a good venue. I think there's so much business out there that they don't care whether you come back ever again.
Right.
They don't need to please you particularly. They can, you know, do a half-hearted job and they'll be fine.
Wow. Yes, you don't even think about that. Anyway, we've been going for nearly an hour. Wow. I was going to say, we're coming up towards the end of the blab. If there's anybody who'd like to have a question, please ask at the side there. Or if anybody would like to jump on and just share with us a little bit of their experience, quite happy to. Do you have any kind of final words of wrap up, Sarah, for a newbie event organizer, what your first experience was and what they should expect?
I think as a rookie organizer, you need to work out what you need out of it and the other people need out of it. And if you can focus on that, if you can work out one objective for each of those different people that you need to please, including yourself, and focus on those, then you'll have the better confidence than if you just sort of think, I know a load of people, I've got a hotel that I like, you know, all that kind of stuff. Really focus on what you want to, what success means for this conference for you. And then, you know, that'll get you heading in the right direction.
Excellent. Thank you very much for those lovely points. And I know Ian has been fabulously retweeting some of the tips that you've been given. So I will try and capture them as well and put them with this video for later on for those people who are replaying it. Thank you very much.